Hello, welcome to Cleekly. Today, we're going to introduce 3 key structures in ECA. When we play a game, we usually can see and experience various game scenes, interactions, or even different stories for different players. With Cleekly, we can achieve all these game effects in ECA, whether it's simply picking up a weapon or a multiplayer side quest. The ECA may look quite long and complicated on some occasions, but they can be broken down into 3 simple programming structures generally: sequences, selections, and loops. A sequence is a series of actions that is performed in order. For example, the morning routine is a sequence. You might wake up, brush your teeth, wash your face, eat breakfast, and go to work. Different people may have different morning routines, but they are all made up of a sequence of various actions. There are also many examples of sequences in game design. This is very common in almost all the games. When players enter the game for the first time, an animated video may be played. Then a beginner's guide may pop up. After several seconds, a close button appears. Then, players can click to close the guide. In Battle Royale games, the map usually shrinks with time, forcing each player to move closer to each other. This is also the structure of sequence. For example, when the game time passes 5 minutes, the map starts to shrink for the first time. After 3 minutes 20 seconds, the map shrinks for the second time. Then, the map shrinks for the third, the fourth time in order. At last, the game ends when there's only one player or team remaining. Sequence is the most basic and default mode of computer programming, and also in Cleekly. The program will perform each action in order, until all the actions in the sequence have been carried out. As we just talked about, sequence is the default mode of programming. But sometimes, we only want the actions to be performed only if a condition is met. Otherwise, we may do nothing or something else. In this case, the structure of selections is very useful. Instead of carrying out all the actions in a specific order, in selections, we ask a question in order to figure out which path to take next. In the example of morning routine, after we finish washing and eating breakfast, we check the weather before going to work. If it is rainy outside, we bring an umbrella and wear rain boots. Otherwise, we wear regular shoes. In games, we use the structure of selections almost all the time when the action's execution is conditional. For example, in puzzle games, if the player finds the correct key, the door opens and the player wins. Otherwise, the door remains closed and prompts "key needed." We can also use selection structure multiple times when more than one condition exists. In Battle Royale games, the player only wins when he is alive and he is the only one remains. First, we need to check whether the player is alive. The player loses the game if not. After confirming the player's state, we also need to check whether the player is the only one remaining in the game. The player wins the game if it is true. Otherwise, the game continues. In this example, we use nested selection structure to check multiple conditions. You can continue to nest more selections to check more conditions. The if statement is the selection structure we use in Cleekly. The structure of if statement is if, then, else. The logic is the same. When if conditions are met, the if-then action list will be performed. Otherwise, the if-else action list will be performed. The third structure is a loop. Sometimes, we want to be able to repeat a set of operations a specific number of times or until some condition occurs. This is done using a loop. The program will execute the same action or action list repeatedly until a certain task is complete. For example, when we try to remember a new vocabulary, we usually repeat the word several times until we can recite it. This is a very simple example of a loop. We also use lots of loops in game production. If we want to create 100 monsters at a time, do we need to write the same creation action for 100 times? Of course not. We can simply loop to create the monsters in just one line in ECA. There are 3 types of loops in Cleekly. Execute action an integer number of times, execute action continuously while condition is met, and traverse list variable. You can choose the most suitable one to use according to your needs. We have introduced the 3 basic structures: sequences, selections, and loops. These 3 structures may look super simple, but when we put them together, we can solve almost all the problems, achieve all the game effects, and even create programs that are very complex, like operating systems, game engines, and so on. For example, we can use selection structure and loop structure to calculate AoE damage. First, we loop all the units within certain range of the ability casting point. Then, use select structure, that is, if statement, in Cleekly, to check the campaign of the unit. If the unit is a friendly unit, we add a buff for it. If the unit is a hostile unit, we deal true damage to it. We can also use selection and loop structure together to achieve the effect of monster regeneration. We can store all the enemies in a unit group. If the unit group is an empty unit group, we wait for 3 minutes and loop to regenerate the monsters. Otherwise, we do nothing. These 2 are simple use of selections and loops in combination. There are plenty of examples in games. Can you come up with some? Now, it's time to review what we learned today. Number 1. We introduced 3 basic structures in ECA: sequences, selections, and loops. These 3 structures will be frequently used in the following lessons. Number 2. We usually use these 3 structures in combination to achieve the game effect we want. They may seem pretty simple on their own, but when combined, they can create some pretty complex software. Thanks for watching. See you next time.